welcome all of you and thanks for accepting our invitation to participate in this roundtable discussion. This is basically a closed door session, so we don't have um, any outside people. We do have some of our corporate members who are participating as audience right now, but later on they are free to ask some questions. Um, so firstly, welcome. And then as I mentioned in my mail, the purpose is to discuss about the involvement or the investments or the engagement by corporates in the ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship, the startup ecosystem that is developing in food and agriculture sector in the country. Our report has shown the report that we have released in terms of the landscape of investments in India. We have seen that the corporate engagement is on the lower side, especially in food and agri. And we all know that the ecosystem is not complete. Ecosystem development is not complete unless the corporates get more and more engaged with the entrepreneurs and startups that are coming up in this space. Most of the startups are in the space of agri-tech, and also we have other, to a minor extent, we have food tech and fintech applications in agriculture. But large part of this has been, and we have seen that about 76% of the investments have gone into output market linkages for outputs. So the agri-techs which are involved in market linkages for outputs. But a lot of the investment has come from financial investors and very little from actually corporates and strategic investors. So that is a point that we wanted to discuss, and basically to understand from all of you that how do you see this situation? What are the reasons for, let's say, what I may call as a lower interest among corporates for engagement and investment into this area? What is holding them back? What are the constraints they face, or what are the challenges and conflicts they face? And how do we make this happen? In the sense that what are the triggers which can actually increase the interest levels? What can ThinkAct do towards this end? These are the broad things that I had already sent as questions to you. So the way we will go about this is that we'll have a bit of opening remarks by each one of you, and lasting 3-4 minutes each. And then we can get into more discussion among the panelists before we invite questions from the audience. So that's the way we will structure this. This is a 90-minute session, so we have good time. There are 7 panelists, so I think it will be an interesting discussion. I'm really looking forward to having this, coming up with some really good points which can be useful for us in taking the whole initiative forward. So let me start by requesting Mr. Abhishek to give his opening remarks and let us know what he thinks of the situation. Yeah.
Thanks, Ram, for that introduction. And first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the ThinkAct team for inviting me to this roundtable discussion. In my opening remarks, I will briefly touch upon the 6 focus questions that you had shared on the email. So I think it's very important that we discuss this topic now rather than after a few years, because in my view, the food and egg sector is an area which is still not really disrupted by tech in a very big way, and this is especially true for emerging markets. So it is estimated that India will become the world's most populous nation by the end of this decade. And in order to feed the expanding population, we will need to address the sticky challenges in agriculture, in the food and egg space that have plagued this industry for decades. Challenges like low yield, productivity, poor farm infrastructure, supply chain inefficiencies, etc., etc. One more important aspect, which I think is a key challenge in this space, is that farmers are usually risk averse. According to me, they find it very difficult to experiment. So and this primarily comes because of their risk stakes are usually high. For a farmer, any change may really lead to a loss of his monthly or yearly income if something goes wrong with his crop. So that risk taking ability is very low in case of the end user, if I may call here in this case the farmers. Within that subset, the small landholders, which is the majority in India, with under, let's say, 50 hectares of land, play a critical role in farming. Now, I believe that such small landholders would benefit enormously from transformative potential of the digital technologies. But the constraints are the steep prices and the high complexities of existing solutions that are there in the marketplace, which make them unaffordable to the smaller landholders. So one initiative I think which is very important is to make the technology solutions available to them at a affordable price, and something which is really useful to them. These challenges also serves as a platform for huge opportunities. Now there are a lot of activities in food and ag space which are not yet tech oriented. It is still done in traditional ways. Perhaps there are too many variables across the wide spectrum of activities. That may be one of the reason. And undoubtedly there is no one common solution to the problems. I think the need of the hour is for the startup ecosystem to focus on specific use cases and ideas and work with the corporates in that direction. One startup or one company cannot address all the issues that are there in the food and egg space. We at Mahindra believe that the Indian agriculture and food system practices needs to be reformed, disrupted, and rebuilt very soon. The participation of innovators is a vital component to bring about this change. And hence at Mahindra, we have invested in tech startups across the world to enable us to develop and deploy next gen farming capabilities at affordable prices. As I had mentioned earlier, affordability and relevance of the technology for the farmer is the two most key aspects which I think should be focused upon. The precision agri and the farm automation space is something which we feel will be the new norm this decade, even among the small landholders if it comes at the right price. And hence we envision a streamlined agriculture ecosystem in India that balances the four key pillars according to us, which is productivity, profitability, sustainability, and well-being. Now, there are various factors that attract us to invest in a early stage companies or a startup, as you may call. Their focused approach to work on a specific use case, their use of the latest technology, and bringing up solutions that helps the farmers, the speed and the agility with which these startup work, the the superior talent, their risk taking ability. We or any other big listed company or a large corporate will not have that risk taking ability as the farmers or as the new startups, new age companies would have, and their flexibility to approach the things in a different way, along with adaptability to changing circumstances. So when it comes, when it really comes to investing in startups, for us, the first tick in the box is that there should be a strategic linkage to our core business and not just the financial returns that a startup is expected to garner. This is what essentially differentiates us as a corporate from a pure play VC or a PE fund. While investing in agtech startups, we do face certain conflicts like, um, do we make the technology available uh, for all the players in the industry, or should it be only restricted to the parent that has invested in the startup? The obvious question is, what's the competitive advantage that the parent gets when he invests in a startup if there is no exclusivity? We have seen in the past that sometimes the product of the startup becomes so big that it ends up disrupting, or it ends up kind of having an effect on the parent company's business operations in a certain geography. Additionally, there are a few pain points like will always be in any startup case. The valuation expectations of the promoters, etc., are usually too far out. And for a public company, making a bigger bet or a risky bets like this becomes difficult, because ultimately we are also answerable to the stakeholders which are public at large. As far as the structure for corporate engagement is concerned with these early stage enterprises, we usually invest only when there is a proof of concept which has been established. I believe that for such companies, the preferred way to attract the corporate investments would be to engage in specific products and projects with the corporates, prove their ability to deliver, and then work towards the funding for the next stage of growth. It's basically perform, deliver, and then expect a funding is what I would feel um, will really open up the floodgates of corporate funding for this sector. platforms like yours, which brings together innovators and corporates, I feel is really very important in today's time, because there are so many ideas and so many new age companies working in specific areas of development, and really the need of the hour is to have a bridge between the two by identifying the right fit for the corporates at the right time. Just to conclude there, I would believe that corporate engagements, whether by way of partnerships at project level or investments by corporates at a equity level, will go a long way to achieve the objective of the real ultimate growth that we are looking at in the sector and improve the outcomes in the Indian agriculture and food space. That's it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chokani. He's from Mahindra and Mahindra, as all of you know, and we are very happy that you have very precisely and concisely given answers to all the questions. And we will come back to some of these points, but you made some very important points that the technology solution should be useful and affordable. I think that is a very important point that comes across from many people who have been investing in this space. And I really appreciate that point. So we will now go to Mr. Shivkumar of ITC. All of you know him, of course, he doesn't need an introduction, group head of agribusiness and IT business of ITC, and a very well-known name in this sector. So I request Mr. Shivkumar for his comments on this. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone again. So our point of view is slightly different from the expectations that Kaundinya has set in terms of corporate investments in the startups. Because while the engagement would possibly be high with the startups, the level of investment in terms of cash input, we believe ideally can come in from other stakeholders in the ecosystem and not necessarily from the corporates. And the reason for this point of view is like this. In terms of agtech startups, to a lesser degree food tech, but largely focused on agtech startups, I think for these to really get scaled up, we should look at two other, I think Kaundinya dropped. Yeah, are you there? Okay. So two other pieces in the building block for a scalable ecosystem. While we have a host of startups, largely point products or solutions, rightly so. One of the other building blocks is what we are calling as solutions integrators, who will stitch some of these point products or solutions together and also set up infrastructure on the ground to deliver the services to the farmers. So that is one other piece. While certainly some of these point product and solution providers do evolve and can be such larger solution integrators. And also it is possible that some of the solution integrators will also have some point solutions integrated into their offering. But largely, if you were to delineate, I would see that as a very different kind of a building block, because it's not easy for all the startup techs to integrate and get into on-ground infrastructure and scale them across. The second building block to my mind is more foundational, that has more digitized data that is usable by all participants. These are data like farmer identity, the land records, the water resources, crop markers, many of these kind of things which are more foundational in nature, ideally standards and interoperable, and potentially government is an ideal candidate to set up this kind of a data infrastructure. And certainly government is moving forward in doing something like this. So these are two other building blocks that will help scaling in this startup investments and startup solutions that we have seen. Lots of experiments and many of them maturing also at this time. So in that context, the way in which ITC is playing a role is more like a solutions integrator in this three-tier architecture. If we say that there is a foundational data from the government. Yeah, again, like the earlier point, it need not only be government. There can be certain public services provided also by the private enterprises. But to delineate, I'm just using those labels. So we are engaged with a host of startups in a three-part kind of an engagement. First is to assist many of these startups with their tech product into a solution for the farmer. Wonderful ideas, great technologies, but translating them as a solution that will become more money in the hands of the farmer is still some level of incubation and where that is required, and that is one area that we are deeply engaged in. The second, even where this tech solution is ready, is the business model to enable right value capture and make it a financially viable business is also an issue with several. Well, some have figured out, many still need to, and therefore we also engage with many of them in helping them in constructing a business model that makes sense. And thirdly, also take these to market, riding on the eChoupal platform. And so it is a reciprocal dependency. What many of these startups can do, we can't, and what we can, that many of these can't. And that reciprocal dependency in a literally plug and play kind of a mode. And this is what we have seen in a less digital kind of a mode over 20 years in the eChoupal model, over the last 3 years now in a more digital mode also. So it's essentially an extension of what we've been doing, albeit in a slightly different kind of a level of plug and play that is there. And so the last bit I want to also add to this point of view is that unlike these who are looking for exits at a point of time in the journey, corporates obviously will need to come in with a lot more strategic intent, much like what Abhishek had just mentioned. And while corporates could also invest as part of structuring the relationship with the startups, so I'm not ruling out investments as we have done in some cases, but there are other players who can bring in cash, like I said, and therefore it is not necessary that corporates will have to bring in. And in fact, as far as ITC is concerned, as part of the design principles of eChoupal, the freedom of choice to the farmers is an important design principle. So if there is a quality assaying company that we are working with, we don't necessarily say that here is the only quality assaying service that we are offering on our platform. Ideally, we would have 3 or 4, and whatever makes sense from a farmer's perspective will ride on that. And so is the case with every other element of the solution. And consequently, rather than investing in some and making them some kind of a conflict of interest as to what we are promoting, because of this design principle, unless it is absolutely necessary and we find some great solution but are not able to raise funds for some reason, we are not necessarily looking at that kind of a mode. Or if the only way for us to monetize is through an investment. So barring those kind of exceptional circumstances, we are not necessarily looking at investment as the default option. So it's a high engagement, a low investment kind of a point of view that we have as far as the startups and ITs are concerned.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So what, of course, your model is quite an established model and you have been a pioneer in this, and I'm sure you must have already, let's say, done a lot of invention of the wheel, and you would have sorted out a lot of things on the way. So I think it's a much more matured model than what maybe some of the others might be attempting. But it's good to know that the principles that you follow. And, this was always an area of interesting discussion for me, that this freedom of choice for the farmer. So on the platform, how much freedom you give. And how much open you make and how much closed you make. I think both have some, let's say, some points which will try to eliminate extremes on both sides. But I think there needs to be a balance between the two. So that is also a very good point that you have mentioned. So we will come back to the other points. So let's move to Mr. Shirish Barwale, who is the Managing Director of MycoSeeds. Shirish, your views?
Yeah, thanks Ram for having me on this forum, and good afternoon to all the panelists. I think we look at innovation as an entire concept, and startups for us is part of that, right? So when we think about innovation and we think about startups, we ask the question first: why do you need startups in agriculture? Right? What is the role that they will play, or what is it that they will do? And I think we're very clear that agriculture can't go on the way it's been going on in India, right, for the last so many decades. Something has to change. It's become unsustainable. Economically, it's become unsustainable. From an environmental perspective, even the government has admitted that they want less and less people in agriculture because it's not the most productive use of a person's time to be farming, right? Especially some crops, if not all, right? And all said and done, right? The corporates that exist, including us, we've built our success on the green revolution model of agriculture, right? Where we introduce new genetics through traditional breeding methods and some new biotechnology. You have tractors and other equipment providers and other ag chem players, and that's how the ball keeps rolling, right? So it in a sense reinforces the current system of agriculture, right? So we look to startups to help us find another path for the future. And we don't know what that is for India today, right? Which is the big challenge, given our land holding and given the other complexities that exist from a policy point of view. So our ask, so to say, or what we're looking for as we assess and meet with and partner with startups is, do you have a vision of agriculture that we believe is possible and which can solve some of these problems that exist today, whether it is sustainability, whether it is profitability, and of course, then what the customer wants, right? The biggest issue is agriculture is not market-based today, right? It's MSP-based. So that is the first thing that we would look for from a startup. And if we do find startups that have promising solutions, have a very fresh vision, right, of what the future should be like, which all of us were at one point in time, maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago, right? We had a different vision of agriculture. That's when we try to engage with them. We see our role. We don't feel we are the best place to finance them. You know, there's many sources of funding, like Mr. Shivakumar said. Right? There's government sources of funding. There's venture capitalists, and there's international financing institutions. Right? So many sources of funding which are way more efficient and way more competent at deploying capital than we would be. We see our biggest role in supporting startups, which we feel would fit the future vision of agriculture, is to provide them access to our network. Right? We have about 10 million farmers for whom we have very detailed records of what they've grown for the last 20 years, 30 years, how much their land holding is, who his father was, right? How much money he made, etc., what the soil conditions are, what the rainfall patterns have been in his region, right? We have a network of 80,000 retailers, and I'm sure each company in this panel discussion has similar networks. But we feel that the biggest value we add is by finding a way to quickly prototype these solutions that these startups have made with our network and see what is working, what is not, and what can be tweaked. That's the biggest value we can really bring rather than just funding at this point in time. And so that's what we've been focusing on, this partnership model to help the startup establish a proof of concept, which then makes it very easy for him or her to raise funding from an institutional source. And for us, see, the key challenges is the second challenge that we've struggled with is while startups, of course, are expected to know less about the sector than we do because we're so entrenched in it in a lot of ways. We do expect that they will have a much better understanding of agriculture than they currently do, right? So we often struggle with that. And we feel that we're going through that learning curve where, you know, you have had startups who've come in, who've succeeded a little bit, and then are learning how to fix the problems that they have in their systems as they understand Indian agriculture better. So I think there's that maturity curve that we're going through, and we are behind in that curve as compared to, say, other more advanced nations would be in terms of the startups understanding the needs of the farmer, the needs of agriculture in India. And so timing also is another area that we struggle with. We feel we're probably a few years away from the startups really understanding the problems and beginning to solve them. And lastly, the problems that are being worked on, right? From our perspective, you know, of course, we know agriculture is going to change. Coming from the biotechnology or the genetic side, right? We believe the biggest changes will be in the way we consume food, right? Some of those trends are already emerging in the West. 2/3 of agriculture is to feed animals, right? Literally, I think 2/3 of the crop planted globally is maize, corn, and a little bit of canola, right? And that is all going in as animal feed. And if the food mix changes from animal-based products and proteins to plant-based proteins, and you're seeing massive growth in this area, right? Suddenly the problems to be solved will change very rapidly, right? Then you're not looking to solve the problem of productivity because you don't need so much crop, right? You're looking to solve the problem of quality of nutrition, and then of course environmental sustainability and new challenges that might emerge with this shift. So I think we're in a place where there's a lot of flux happening, and you know, I think next 2-3 years will give a lot more clarity in terms of direction in which way things are headed. And the last piece comes to biotechnology, right? Of course, GM has been a big debate. It's been successful in parts, a failure in others. But the fact remains that a lot of things that we were using animals to produce, right, which was economically expensive, which was environmentally expensive, now we're being able to do it more and more efficiently using microbes, right? We started with medicines. I mean, insulin probably was one of the first examples. But now people are going down to milk substitutes, to egg substitutes, to even leather substitutes, right? I was reading that you know, mycelium roots are being used to create leather in fermenters. Of course, there is a learning curve, and you will go through that curve of cost, competition, and efficiency. But the fact is, these technologies are possible today, and eventually we will get or make them cost competitive, right? In some users, if not all. So agriculture, which was servicing as an industry for raw material for a lot of these things, will suddenly change quite a bit. And so we are trying to find startups which are focusing on some of these problems. And unfortunately, because of the policy environment that exists in India related to biotechnology, maybe partly we are to blame because we haven't been effective at managing the whole GM debate effectively, is causing corporates like us to be a little hesitant in financially funding some of these initiatives. And a lot of these initiatives then are happening in startups outside India, whether it's in Israel or in the US or in Europe. So I think having a very stable and predictable policy environment, the last point that I wanted to make, is very, very important if we are truly to take that leap forward, right? And reimagine what agriculture's purpose is for the next 100 years.
Thank you, Shirish. I think it was very interesting to see that you give higher importance to engagement than investment. I think that is something which has come out very clearly from your talk. And I think it is also similar to what Mr. Shivakumar said. So I think this is another way of engaging with startups and offering them the benefits of your network and your other assets and skills which they can use. So that's good. So we'll move on and we'll go to Mr. Pramod Prasad from Godrej Agrovet. He's the head of strategy and business development from Godrej. Mr. Prasad.
Yeah, thank you, Ram, and thank you, everyone. I think a large context has already been set out in terms of the role of AgTech, role of startups in the ag ecosystem. So I'll just focus what I have to say on our own specific experience that has been in this journey. Right, we took a 10 years ago, we participated in Omnivore's first fund, and I think back then that was a big leap from a venture investment point of view. Right, and it's come a long way, and Omnivore just closed the second fund, and we did not participate in it. Right, so that in a nutshell has been our journey on the venture side. Basically, when we look at startup or how we engage, there are broadly two ways we do that. One is that we help some of the startups to test their product market fit. Is it viable? Is it works? It's a fairly light engagement of sorts, because the win for the startups is that they get to test it with some expertise, and the win for us is that we get to understand what's advancing, and the commitment doesn't really go beyond that. Right? So the way it's more of partnerships, mentorships, and at best an accelerator, which we have not done, but that's the level which you can participate when that is the lens you use to look at the startups. The other is a far more deeper engagement, and I think it's already been alluded to as a more of strategic thing, wherein we actually participate in their entire journey and ensure that it goes to the market in one way or the other, and we take the risk in taking it to the market. And the risk is not necessarily in terms of the investment risk; it's also in terms of your market risk, because you are offering that to your consumer through your channel. So any backlash, you also own that. Right? And for that to happen, I think there must be a strong belief in alignment to the core value proposition you're already offering. Let me elaborate on that a little bit. Godrej Agrovet is one of the leading, largest, cattle feed player. So which means that our value proposition is that when we go to the farmers, that you use our products, more or less your cost per liter of milk will come down, right? And the quality require the required quality will be obtained, right? That's the core value proposition. So when let's say through Omnivore invested in a company called Stellantis. That's also in the same animal agriculture. Their whole proposition is that we study the many variables that are there in the livestock, and then we try to improve the productivity, etc. Now, unless we're able to firmly establish that value proposition farm by farm, I cannot take that to every farmer, right? And I think that alignment is very critical. While in a way we are invested, but we're not taking them to the market. We're using them in a different way. In our dairy company, we're doing some of their instruments, which helps us. Right? So there we are a bit of a consumer customer. So this whole alignment to the core value proposition is very critical. Even before you take a financial stake, before you take them to the market as a partner also. And I'll give you an example that's kind of working for us. So in the same cattle feed value chain, we've invested in a startup. We own the majority of that. We partnered with a couple of Israeli scientists to develop high genetic potential cows, and that we've remained invested, right? And obviously year on year we record book losses in our books, but that is something we really believe. That is something that as we get more convinced in the idea, we're able to invest a little bit more, because it aligns very well with our core value proposition. Because again, when I'm going to say if you buy these cows, you're going to be able to generate more milk from the same cow, which means that more profits for you, which is aligned to the same cattle feed value proposition that I'm going to say. And because I have a significant stake in ensuring that value gets delivered, I'm more free to invest in it. I'm more free to go and give that value proposition to the farmer. Right? So these two, other, and these experiences are hard to come by. And I think people already spoke about in terms of from one, we might not be the most qualified to vet startups because it requires a certain amount of mindset. Two, we are a public listed company. Our mandate for capital allocation is not to invest so much in startups. It's more to invest in our own growth, and there's enough headroom for the sectors we operate in. And our questions are in terms of engagement with startups is not the core of what we chase. So if it is not a core of what we chase, then how do we make sure that how do we retain interest, right? So the retaining part of the interest comes in that, how tightly aligned is it with the core value proposition, and how are we able to filter some of those startups there? Then we can take a very serious interest there. Otherwise, it remains in terms of more of, getting to know one another, giving them some amount of market experience, where we get some amount peek into their, what's happening in the startup. So that's great to share that with you.
Thank you. I think one thing which comes across is that there are many non-financial ways in which engagement can take place. And I think I would like to discuss this once we finish all the presentations or opening remarks, is that how do you measure the non-financial engagement? Because the measurement is mostly done in terms of investment. But are there methods by which we can measure the engagement, corporate engagement, which is beyond or which is outside the investment space? But let's come back to that. So we will now go to Mr. Roshanlal Tamak. He is from DCM. He is the head of the sugar business and DCM. Yes, Mr. Tamak.
Yeah. Thanks, Ram, and good afternoon again, everybody. It is a pleasure and privilege to talk to all of you. As far as DCM Shriram engagement with startup ecosystem is concerned, as my earlier speakers have mentioned, basically it has been on partnership basis. And we have given them clear space where they can operate, especially in the areas of aggregation of agriculture machinery, agri-extension, and of course, input supply, and also in the niche technologies like use of artificial intelligence in agriculture, using satellite imagery and machine learning, etc., etc. And it is heartening to note that some of them have really gained traction out of that. And we have provided them all support in terms of ground truthing and practically all help at the field level. And their business has also grown and their credentials have also proven in due course of time. As far as from corporate standpoint of view, we clearly believe that there is a lot of value as far as corporates are concerned in engagement with startup ecosystem. And absolutely there is no hitch and there is no obstacle as far as partnership is concerned, and giving them real life assignments and real life projects or real life problems. So there is no issue. However, in terms of financial participation, yes, there are issues. One, what Pramod has just mentioned, that we are governed by corporate structure. And there is of course, there are processes already in place. And there is a lot of dilemma whether to invest there or not invest there. So obviously my suggestion over there is that there is definitely a case to participate financially also, but the execution of that has to be done through a separate vehicle or separate instrument. There has to be a separate entity at corporate level. It's very difficult in most of the established corporates to go through this route. There has to be a separate entity where decision-making process is easy, agility is there in decision-making, and we can match the speed. And as far as another major challenge, which I feel that where is the disconnect? Basically, the disconnect is that corporates have to identify their pain point. And the technology providers or startup, they should be able to provide the solution to those. And of course, in cost-effective solution and long-lasting solutions should be there. So identifying the pain points and then matching the expectation. This is one level which is required. And second, of course, the thought process. I'm just talking of in terms of financial participation. There has to be alignment between the thought process also, because they operate at a different level, established corporates operate at a different level. So there also, that thought process has to be aligned, but obviously it will come out of engagement only. and where I feel that Think Ag has a very meaningful and important role to play. So what should be the contours of the engagement? What are the expectations? What are the deliverables? Those should be clearly defined, and definitive value propositions come out of should be there for both the stakeholders. So these are my views on the subject.
Thank you. I think you have done a lot of work with, you have mentioned a lot of focus points, focus areas where you have engaged with the startups.
Yeah.
But this involved financial investment, or this did not involve financial investment?
So this was not investment per se, but in terms of resources,
engagement and
infrastructure.
resources.
Yeah, in terms of resources and infrastructure, physical resources in terms of manpower and infrastructure. Yes, we have helped them generously. So, but in terms of capital investment per se, so far we have not done.
Okay. You mentioned about a separate entity may have to do the investment. I think some of the companies, some of the global corporations also follow that principle of having a venture arm. It's a separate legal entity, which is a venture arm, which works just like a VC fund. They do their investments, and they follow all the principles which venture capital funds follow, in terms of assessing suitability for investment and returns and various kinds of things. But that's a good thing that perhaps some of the Indian corporates also can think of. So as an option to actually structure the kind of work. Okay, let's go to Mr. Junaid Altaf from FIL Industries. He is a Group Executive Director. So Junaid, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kondania. Good evening once again, everyone. I'd like to bring in a mid-corporate perspective to the discussion that has been held so far. Whereas most of the problems, opportunities, work being done by larger corporates has been highlighted, I'd like to take a bit of a divergent view in where I believe mid-corporates fit in this sector in India. Just as a quick recap, at FIL we work throughout the value chain in agriculture and horticulture. We are in agri inputs, we are in food processing, we are in agro infrastructure and cold chain management. And we're also going back in fundamentally going back to productivity and growing at the farm level. So that is that is the system with which I'd like to share my experience in. I'd like to just summarize what I'm going to speak in three large parts: motivation, challenge, and possible intervention for ease of follow-up and recap. Motivation. I think clearly at a mid-corporate level, we look at the whole startup innovation system as an out-of-the-box solution for a large problem challenge that certainly exists in the industry. At a mid-corporate level, we're in the middle of having efficient resources between developing products for the market and working on innovation. I believe that is where there is real value for mid-corporates in working with startups, in bringing in leaner thinking and solutions that could possibly be piloted at the market level. We can't specialize in everything. We certainly need to look at scale, and I believe for a company that at our level, this could be a win-win. A personal perspective, which I do believe, business comes with a sense of entrepreneurship, and as an organization grows, it is obviously combined with a sense of risk capital and growth capital. I think this is one clear meeting point for a corporate vision with startups. So this is how we look as a motivation towards the startup system in the country. In terms of challenges, to me, the largest challenge which the industry presents in this intervention between startups and corporates is the institutional and legal framework of the country. I think many a times we want to pilot a number of ideas. India is a large country with 29 states, or India is one big continent with 29 countries, whichever way we look at it. I think both hold true. And while as we have clear mandates, directions at a central level, I think varied policies at the state levels also make it challenging for mid-corporates in actually scaling a solution or exploring a solution with startups. Magnification of the solution to the value chain, that is critical, I believe, and that has to be the end output. So clearly to me, the institutional and legal framework of the country presents a sizable limiting factor in engaging more and more with the corporates. For us, we truly believe that engagement with startups, mid-corporates can play the role of matchmakers and pioneers in pilot projects. Mid-corporates work with large corporates, so we have a clear view, insight into the needs of what large corporates could potentially want. We are closer to the ground level in certain areas, and that is where we can completely support and bridge this gap of innovation versus need in the industry. From a personal point of view, again, I believe that ThinkAg can play a role the ecosystem of innovators, startups, as opposed to pure financiers. Corporates clearly have a clear strategic DNA, which has to fit in with their appetite to look at any ecosystem, and that is where I believe ThinkAg can play a leading role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have brought out a different perspective, because I think on the panel all the others are big companies. So you have brought out the point of view of a mid-sized corporate, and that's very good. And also you presented all the points in those three buckets, which is also very good. I think this this is a good idea that you mentioned, that big corporates and mid corporates can work together sometimes, that you can provide the last mile connectivity for some of the big corporates who want to engage with some of the ground level startups. Yeah, so that's an interesting thought that they have put forward. Thank you. So thanks for that. Now we come to Mr. Keshavan. I deliberately kept you till the last because you are, I had to balance between highly experienced people on the panel and place them at different slots, so that we capture the experience at different points of time in the whole discussion. So Mr. Keshavan, up to you now to give your points of view, and TAFE's points of view, and your own. You're highly experienced in this space, so please.
Mr. Keshavan, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I just muted myself. See, let me try to answer very specific questions what you have raised. 1 minute, I just opened up the questions and then this got muted. So I got into a little bit of a trouble. Can you just help me with your first question, because I had it in the screen.
What motivates the corporates to invest in the innovation and startup ecosystem of food and agriculture?
Let me be very, very honest in this answer.
Yeah.
At present, nothing. I'm very blunt in saying that, because I work with very large corporates and on startups. The issues, what really happens here is, see, in a startup, there are three different kinds. One is the technology startup. Second is the operational startup, and something falls in between. Honestly, the operational startups don't have the bandwidth in India. Effectively, the large corporates has to come in and chip in and handle and literally run it. In fact, there are very good instances. I can come back and say that, I can even talk about TAFE's experience. We tried to work with a startup and then found that it may be much more easier to roll it, because we are able to get a much larger coverage the way things want. So this is an operational issue. The minute I get into a startup which is on technology based, the immediate question is, if I put in money, who handles the IP? Will it go to my competition? I mean, they're all practical questions. We can't just brush all these things away.
Yeah.
It's the reality of life today. So that is why we always have a little bit of a difference of opinion when you are talking about investing in a startup, because large companies like to have a much higher hold on startup. And it's oxymoronism. The minute I have a large hold on startup, it is no more a startup. The best way to leave a startup to work in his own area. So this is a big issue many of the corporates are facing. And it is not an experience of India alone. I want you to look at the so-called large startups on agriculture, on technology. And I want you to really closely look at the current balance sheets. You will find there is a lot of money has gone in. There is a lot of market value proposition coming up, but I don't see that balance sheet breaking even the next 5 years. So the question is, you pump in a lot of money on agriculture, and I don't want to give them names because I've studied a lot of big names, and I found that it's very, sometimes worrying us to look at it, because we don't see two things: consistency and ability to scale up and ability to sustain. These are the three areas. This is why the startups we are a little bit worried about getting into startup area. Let me talk to your next question. Sir, can you give me your next question now?
What are the advantages, challenges, and opportunities that you see in this space?
Yes, I think the advantages are a lot. There's no doubt about it. But some of those challenges, what I told earlier, is becoming the real problem today. Okay. Correct. First of all, the one problem in India is startups are small. And we genuinely believe that the only way to bring up a startup is that we actively get involved. But then the purpose of getting into a startup goes away when you're actively getting involved.
Yeah.
So this is a dichotomy, and I think this will continue. So I tend to agree with a view that we must have a venture capital kind of a thing within a company. Then I wanted to basically differentiate one thing. See, you are in a corporate world, and somebody is looking at your top line and the bottom line. And honestly, very few people are really looking at what today's investment, what is going to happen after 5 years or 7 years. Neither your shareholder wants to understand it, nor your investors wants to understand it. Everybody is looking for immediate returns. So this is the problem of all the corporate world. So there is a different entrepreneurial mindset. See, one of the reasons we tried doing it, because we come from at least I come from an owner-driven company perspective. Yeah. So we don't have to sit and justify your 200 people, ye kyun kiya. But still, where we all get into a little bit of hurdle is that what I told you. Where do I invest? See, we are definitely looking into technologies which is directly going to be beneficial. That's very rightly said. It has to be the farmer. If it is not beneficial, if it does not bring down its cost, all that you are trying to do is a waste. And there, when you really start working very closely with them or trying to understand what they are doing, we find that what they actually put up front and what really we see once you start working is a lot of difference between both. In fact, I have gone up to 100 new startups we analyzed one way or the other within India, and close to almost 24 outside the country. That's why I'm able to tell you this. If I'm finding a little bit of a jeopardy in this. What is your third question, sir?
What are the conflicts that corporates face during the decision-making process? I think you have covered
I think I answered that upfront. The conflict is this.
Yeah, you have covered them. What are the pain points for CVCs? That also, I think, got covered a little bit. Pain points in the sense that when you take this decision.
Yeah, pain point is very simple to say. I think it is, see, let us look at it. If you enter, a corporate is entering, you need to give a multiple result. And suppose corporate is a 10,000 crore corporate, an additional 10 crores is not really going to help them. I think this will be true with large corporates. That is why I said we have to be a very clear differentiation between a corporate structure running corporate current business and a very clear venture capital running venture capital. It has to be measured differently. And the problem what we notice is that measuring that differently is finding it extremely difficult in the corporate culture. I talked to many of my friends in the corporate, and they said, why we say that when you start measuring it, and there is a CEO or somebody running it, the questions are, what's your return? The question should be, what are you going to get it after 5 years, 10 years? It's a very different way of looking at it. Who understand this is only the venture capitalists. I don't think our people don't understand. What are the last questions, sir? I think I have one more question there.
What right structure for corporate engagement with early stage enterprises? Do you think, I mean, of course, this is something that we just talked about also, that a separate venture arm is a type of a structure which can actually undertake that. But any other thoughts you have on that?
No, basically, I also genuinely believe it has to be a separate venture capital arm. And I will say the only person who can actually create this, even otherwise, is only one person, who is the CEO. If the CEO has the right mindset and says, I'm going to venture into this, I'm going to support the startups, and he is willing to take that kind of a different view, which is going to be slightly different from a shareholder's view. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So that man can make the difference. Otherwise, you need to have a very clear CVC arm with very clear specified goals. What should be the way to work in, which has to be very similar to how the venture capitalists today operate.
Yeah, correct.
So
and the final
this
question
is
sorry. Final question: what can do to bring greater velocity into corporate engagement in this space?
Sir, Indian agriculture to bring in greater velocity. I'm talking only on agriculture here. In Indian agriculture to bring in greater velocity, I think the current new laws of the government, which came to the Atmanirbhar, especially on the from the let us say the farm gate to the customer, that I think there is a lot I think startups can really do. At least that is where technology can directly come in. IT and related technologies can come in. And I'm going to take it as technology interventions, because larger companies like us or somebody who's going to come in from abroad need to take it into the operable area. I'm not going to, I will not put my money into operable solutions with the startups, because India is too large a country for them to handle it. Because if you have to put that kind of a money, suppose I'm willing to invest 1,000 crores or 500 crores on a startup, the question is that why can't you do it yourself? So that's the question I think all our corporates will have to answer. So I think in that case, we will take the technology. How to partner with them is also a different question. These are the engagements people are going to ask these questions. If I put in, even if I put in 20, 30, 40, 50 crores into a startup, do I tend to get these IPs? Do I tend to tend this, or what happens if I develop everything, it goes to everybody? Typical questions the corporate will ask. So these things require an answer. I genuinely believe we really don't have an answer, because we never had this kind of innovative thing as far as India is concerned, because we are by and large brick and mortar companies. We really require a different thinking, which came in IT, but to bring it into agri, I think is going to take some time, sir. This is what I genuinely feel.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. So those are the questions that I had mentioned in my mail. So thanks for that. Interesting thing is that we had one discussion before this. So one of the companies mentioned that they have a venture capital arm, and the venture capital arm is encouraged to fund new ventures which can potentially disrupt the original company's business, right? Because that is a criterion they use, that you go and fund such businesses which can disrupt the original business. So that means it's a different kind of a mindset. Of course, it's some of it may not be in India, they operate all over the world. But I think it is also a mindset that many of us find it difficult to actually implement, because, like one of, I think it was Mr. Tamak who mentioned that it should not it should not affect the original business of the main company. So I think those are all things which come up as questions in your decision-making process also when we are undertaking this. So now I think we have taken more time than what was originally scheduled, but I think it's good. We have another half an hour to go. And now I throw it open. So panel can actually, I would like to ask if some of you can talk about I mean, you can ask questions to each other if you want to understand a little more from what people have said. But I also would like you to name some of the areas which will excite you in terms of you means your corporation which you represent, or personally you think the space which has a huge future, like you just mentioned, Mr. Kesavan, that farm gate to the consumer. So that is a space which you believe the technology can play a big role. Like that, are there areas which you would like to say which excite you in terms of engaging with startups or investing in startups or whatever it is?
See, here I can actually give you an answer which is really relevant to the mechanization industry, which is I think is very important. See, when I see mechanization means anything from soil engagement till the farm gate. That is where normally the mechanization people come in. So where we have about 5 inputs, basically the seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, water, and power. These are the main 5 inputs which go in. And we genuinely believe that all these areas, technological interventions are possible so that we can actually save on each of these things. And the last but not the least, at the farm gate, it also can save on a lot of wastages, what is happening today. It can be 20%, 15% on grains. So these are the areas I think any mechanization company who are involved in mechanizing agriculture will love to. So it really, what it means is it can be sensors, it can be drones, it can be so many other things which can all help to make these 5 elements which goes as inputs to actually reduce. I'll give you one simple example and close it. We always ask a question. Our normal practice is you plow the entire field. But what people forget is if you want to put one seed, you need only this much diameter for probably 7 inches deep. So why the heck are you removing the entire? So this is such fundamental question. Technology is already slowly coming up. These are the areas I genuinely believe that you will find specific technologies coming up, startups coming up, and you will be able to help them.
Okay. Abhishek, anything you would like to mention as areas of excitement for you? Areas of excitement in the startup system, which will actually make you engage or invest?
I think as I mentioned in my earlier note that something to do with precision agri, farm automation, and then this is over and above what Mr. Kesavan has mentioned. Yes, I think I fully agree with his inputs here. Specific we are kind of focusing on precision agri as a space, and we have done investments in the past across geographies, not only in India. On specific use cases, be it harvest readiness, imaginary analytics, artificial intelligence, startups in all those areas. So these are not to do something with the 5 ingredients which Mr. Kesavan talked about, but specifically on something which is beyond that, disease protection, harvest readiness, etc. So things like those, I think, is something which really excites us, and we are open to all those kind of opportunities.
Thank you. Pramod?
Yeah.
What excites you? What excites you on Godrej?
I think one thing that's going to be of a lot of prominence, and especially in the entire food supply chain, and also from where we come from in terms of the animal protein value chain, is traceability. And the question is that how do you integrate that with the consumer, and what is the kind of the premium, or is it really important to the consumer? And then how do you ensure you build the traceability through the value chain? I'm not talking about blockchain, etc., etc. I'm just saying that you should be able to know and trust where your food came from, and is there a very cost-effective way of doing that? Okay? I'm just saying that I'm not a technology person, so what solves it probably is what the startups can tell us. Right? Okay. The other is in terms of one of the environmental impact of having so many cows in India is about the carbon emissions. Right? So you don't need so many cows we are the largest milk producer in India. We produce combined to US, China, Brazil, we put together, we produce nearly as much, or if not more. right? But we have significant amount of our yield per cow is significantly lower, right? So I think over a period of time, we will also have to answer this question in terms of what are the carbon emissions coming because of that, right? And how do we minimize that? Current solutions are expensive, right? There are ways to reduce that through feed and nutrition, but that is going to outprice you outside of the market. Why should the farmer feed the cow so much expensive where he's going to lose money, right? So, and working around these things, which is, in terms of how do you reduce the environmental footprint, and can you bake that then into the traceability story, right? So, and I think that can become an important element. The other, coming to crops, I think, there already, ideas that have already been circulated in terms of precision agriculture, etc. The key is that how do you translate a lot of that information into actionable advice, and how will that advice result in value for the farmer or value for anyone involved in the supply chain? It's only then you will make it sustainable, right? So, and I think that the farm advisory bit, in terms of taking that last mile, saying that, you know what, I've collected hundreds of data points because I've collected from your tractor, I've collected from the satellites, I've collected from your farm, but what does that mean? Does it help you tell you put in the seeds today, you put in the seeds as, Mr. Kesh was saying that, 7-inch deep and this much this, and you do this, you actually do that and you see the benefit coming out of it. You don't need, it'll set the ball rolling there, right? So I think, bringing it together, I don't know whether a startup is able to go to do it or a corporate needs to do it, but I think a large amount of focus needs to get in there. And I think that's the holy grail. I'm sure everybody is thinking it, but I think getting there is the key challenge. I think these are the top priorities that, that will really excite us.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Shivakumar.
Yeah, a lot has been said on the digital technologies. I just would add areas related to things like whatever that we can do with respect to harvest and post-harvest quality losses.
Yeah.
And the wastage that would be there. Things like delayed harvesting, where vegetables or fruits and all of this can just sit on the plants for a much longer duration, and you harvest when you want rather than get stuck. I think that is one area
delayed ripening,
we would see.
Yeah.
The other is with respect to climate resilient seeds. So we don't know whether it's going to rain or whether it's not going to rain. A lot of conventional technologies have been on drought proofing seeds, but whether seeds withstand even when there are several agronomy practices and related equipment for the climate resilience when we don't know whether it's going to rain or it's going to be drought. But seed technologies are one area where we are seeing some amount of work. So that will be the other area of interest, given that that's the biggest risk that we are facing on the production side today. And lastly, I would also add the area of on-farm extraction, on-farm processing. Things like you don't need to let the plant be there on the farm, whether it is open to sky or in the greenhouse or wherever. And you are continuously milking the plant of its nutrients and of its essence, whatever that you're taking, rather than looking at plants as once harvested, finished off. So these are some of the technologies that we are seeing as of great excitement just now.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Tamak, Roshan?
Yeah. So basically, I shall not repeat what others have said. Three areas. One, if we somehow can get the optimum maturity period of any crop. So that is really a game changer, because agriculture yield and industrial yield is maximum at optimum maturity period. So this is one thing. Second, in terms of precision farming, essentially this nutrient application. So water application, of course, is by drip or so. You can just, with some addition, you can regulate or you can control. But nutrient application is a major area because there is a lot of wastage in terms of resources.
Okay. Thank you. Junaid?
I'd like to add, two thoughts. I think there is a substantial, tech and on-the-field opportunity in collateralization and financing. I think this is something that should be explored further, and there is a lot of value that can be done here. Just taking a step back, I do believe the time is also ripe for us to possibly envision a BYJU'S for farming. There is edtech is a big sector that is coming up, but given the scale scope of farming agriculture, to actually think of an edtech startup that will specialize in actually training the next generation farmers, I think that kind of an ecosystem, even if it is envisioned over the next 10 years or 20 years, will ultimately lead to working at the very cusp of the problem and potentially providing the right solution. This is, I think, just those two.
Sure, good idea. Yeah. Shirish?
Yeah, so I'll just, again, I think our list will keep increasing the more people you ask, Ram. So I'll add on to what others have said rather than.
Sure.
But so technologies that will keep, like I think Junaid said a little bit, next generation of farmers interested, which is a big concern for us, right? They don't want to farm the way their fathers and grandfathers have. So how do we look at startups to provide a vision for that? Because we don't know it. I don't know what farming should look like so that the next generation is interested. Is it something he does on a tablet PC or what? I don't know, right? But that is very, very important. Part of it is education, part of it is small scale mechanization, part of it is digital technologies. Right, today, of course, you have these farms, these greenhouses and farms, but they're very expensive and not scalable. So we're looking at that. Second area, of course, which I mentioned earlier, is we feel a bulk of the low value agriculture which we do today, at least globally. India, it's a little bit less, but it's increasing rapidly, is related to animal feed, right? And that is because we're using animals as kind of production models for a lot of the food we're consuming. And we strongly believe, of course, I'm vegetarian, so I have a very big bias on this front. Pramod might disagree with me, but we strongly believe that equal or comparable nutrition can be provided much more efficiently, right? And there's a lot of food technology work being done out there to replace some of these animal sources of raw material with plant-based sources, or even more efficient ways to produce the animal feed, right? Instead of using maize and soybean, you're talking about making insect meal much more efficient or cost-effective to produce. Now, whether we succeed or not, I don't know. But if you can produce silk, there is definitely an opportunity to produce insect meal in an efficient manner. And now they're doing it for shrimp and fish fairly efficiently. And it's not far, I think, the day when they'll be able to do it to substitute maize as well. Right? It's a matter of time and scale. So these are the areas that I think we're very interested in. Industrial biology and substitution of animal products.
A kilo of meat, when we produce, it consumes 5 kilos of agricultural produce to produce 1 kilo of meat. So I think when we switch from animal-based nutrition to plant-based nutrition, I don't know, maybe we may actually reduce the amount of agriculture we may have to do. I don't know. I have not done that calculation, but I'm just addressing the point you mentioned that, we do a lot of animal base. We produce a lot for animal feed, that's what is very right. Okay, so I think a couple of more questions are coming up. One is that, because I think many of you felt that engagement, non-financial engagement is also equally important. So how do we actually create some models for that? I mean, is there something we can, and is open to everyone, so anyone can answer this. How do we actually create some models in which we can capture the need and the availability of these kind of engagements? Is there some structure we can give to that?
So, so
Yeah.
yeah, basically, we have to do matchmaking between two. One is what is the pain point or improvement areas for the corporate. So that we need to brainstorm and come out clearly that these are the areas where we need some help, some innovation, some solution. So that, of course, corporate has to do. And on the other side, clearly, who are the right fit as far as startups are concerned? So who are in this space? So that their expertise and our need, that should match somewhere. And probably you can play that matchmaking role.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
If I can say, I think one, from a corporate side, there needs to be an executive mandate. And I think this point was earlier mentioned, the CEO needs to decide. So, and I think that's very, very important, because success is not guaranteed. Doesn't mean that you work with 5 startups, doesn't mean that at the end of whatever that program may be, whatever that engagement may be, that you will get anything out of it, right? You need that belief that I work with 5 startups every year, at least 2 or 3, and in the next span of 5 years, something is going to work out, and that's the price for us, right? So this staying capacity and that commitment is very much required. Now, once you've secured, then I think the points are being made in terms of what are your burning issues, and then it also a little bit of matchmaking. Sometimes you also don't know what you want to do. Right, so I might not know the problem, but if I see 3 people working on it, I might be able to link it to my signal. You know what? Some of this can be applicable to this part of my value chain, this part of this product, etc. Right. So some amount of that exploratory matchmaking, and then commitment to say that every year we're going to work with 5 startups, and then we're going to do this for the next 5 years or 3 years at least, and then see what's going to happen. Then I think that we'll learn a little bit. Then we'll also get better in terms of how to get them in. And I think that's that should be the exploratory approach that we need to adopt.
The general principle is that in startup investments, when you make, this is a principle which any fund or VC fund or anybody will follow. And even I follow as an angel investor. I am also an angel investor in startups. So if you invest in 10, only 1 will succeed. If 1 succeeds, you are lucky actually, because then you can recover all your investment and maybe more than your investment. So for a corporate to take the decision, it's not easy, because they know that if they're making 10 investments, 9 will fail. So that decision to be taken, and if it is a very professional and big organization, the investment is made by one CEO and the failure is faced by the next CEO. So it can also happen like that. But I think that's where actually you need a lot of structures in place for them to take those decisions. I think that is something which we need to actually address for financial investments. Yes, any other points? Yeah, Shirish.
One thing we are trying to do in Tamil Nadu, I can only tell you that. Yeah. We are trying to do something on a fintech startup. We said we'll start with the fintech startup rather than getting to agriculture, because fintech startup may be a little more easier to understand for the people are concerned. Agriculture, they are still a way to understand it. Here, it's a government and the corporates. We are coming together through the local chamber, Madras Chamber is supporting it, and trying to create a startup awareness system for fintech. And the government is willing to put money, the corporates are willing to put money. The whole idea is to create a brainwaving situation, so that what are the exact questions, what is the corporate needs, what is the government needs, and how this people, other startups can come and match it. And we are trying to extend it also by giving a skill development for startups. Suppose you are getting into that, and then what are the kind of people you require in this area? So there are two aspects to it. One is idea generation, understanding the customer needs, and if things go well, it should culminate into also a skill development, so that some of this thing can be rolled. I think we can do something very similar in agriculture. I think because government is going to play a large role in agriculture. Like Shivkumar says, data. Today, they are trying to drive the data. I don't think individually we can't drive the data. Same way, if they can come in, corporates can come in, startups can come in and create one forum. I don't call it an all India forum. All India forum, many things, agriculture has to be much more local. So I would say at least at state level, we can succeed. I think we can do a big things as far as startups are concerned.
Okay. Shirish, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, I think it's also a learning process for us, right? So we also don't know how to measure success, right? I mean, we're trying to create a funnel and, trying to see how we're taking startups from one stage to another, right? And trying to define arbitrary criteria for success. So, of course, one is the matching, but how do you help us kind of go forward in that journey, right? Increasing the level of engagement with the startup, which eventually leads to either an integration with the business or some form of investment, right? Till the point that the startup is sustainable or whatever you define as success. Right?
Do you think corporate? Yeah, Junaid. Yeah.
I just want to add, I also think, large corporates especially can engage with startups, not all startups, but certainly some startups vis-a-vis the CSR budgets that are allocated each year. Obviously, a clear legal framework along with the defined executive mandate has to be there. But I think if that can be worked through, there is a sizable financial allocation along with engagement that possibly already exists with large corporates, especially ones specializing in agriculture and food and beverage. And this can then be combined with skill development. So I think there is as a financial pool, there is a defined point already that exists with the corporates. Large.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point. So will it make sense to do collaborative joint investments? Can corporates make joint investments in startups? Is it a model which can work either between a corporate and a fund, or between a corporate and another corporate? Like Junaid, you mentioned earlier that a large corporate and a mid-sized corporate providing last mile connectivity and things like that. Are these models possible? Is there something we can do on that front? Mr. Sivakumar, what do you think?
So while that is certainly possible, but I think my view is slightly contrarian. What might make sense in light of many points made by other panelists also today, and certainly my point of view is that aggregators or platforms could really look to the various startups in their portfolio and identify what are the potential gaps that need to be bridged for their scaling up, and then create that as some sort of a pitch deck to corporates and asking for ecosystem as a service. So we looked at what ecosystem services ITC offering or what DCM has offered, and similarly what MICO is doing and so on. And then say that they link to certain achievement of milestones by the startup, the equity share will be given to the corporate which is providing those ecosystem services. So it's a performance linked. So it's almost like a sweat equity equivalent, but for ecosystem service, so that you are aligning that incentive. So you're not really looking for money from corporates on top of the ecosystem service.
I think we lost him, I think.
Yeah, I think
there is some issue in his connection.
Yeah.
Ram, another thing to explore, which some people have said, at least for research-based startups, is you can use your CSR funding for funding some of this research. So if there is a way that ThinkAct could enable us to channel our CSR funding towards startups, right, that could be an area where financial investment could become available more easily.
Correct.
Right?
So
I can only say that if a company is serious about supporting a startup or putting money, I think you should be able to put the real money where it is, because the CSR will become an excuse. This is what I'm really worried about, because anyhow you have to write off 2%, so kuch bhi karega, and that focus goes off. So I would genuinely say, if you're interested, put hard money where it matters, so that there's a focus, somebody is going to push for it, and things happen.
Yeah,
This
true.
will happen. It's a question of time, sir. This will happen.
I fully agree.
No, that's a very true point, sir. The only issue we struggle with is the success rate of 1 to 10, right? You can't put hard money behind all 10, right?
Sir, this is what we thought of R&D also in the past.
Yeah.
See, interestingly, at least on tractors, I can definitely tell you people will support. We never got a technology for tractors from abroad. Almost everybody, whether it is Mahindra or us or international, everybody did their own work in India because less than 100, there was nobody willing to give you at the right cost. So every one of them put money on R&D, and I'm so sure that only 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 actually succeeded. So that's the way we did R&D, and now we have learned that, okay, we'll have to sink that kind of a money for one success. At least 20 to 1 itself is acceptable. This need to happen in startup also. And this will happen. I'm so sure it will happen. Question of time.
Yeah, Mr. Shivakumar, I think you were lost. Maybe your connection got. But you finished your point, or you have?
Yeah, pretty much that was the point. If you got a gist of it.
Okay, no, it's a very good point. I think this is something which we should explore further. So, any other questions from the other audience we can take for the next 5 minutes?
Yeah, you have my question here. So not a single person in this group has mentioned that as a treasury that they see this as a sector where they can make money, right? So that's a bit disturbing.
Treasury function. Someone made that, who said that? Anyway, but I think the question is, why should that be an area of investment? That's what you're saying, Ritu?
No, I'm saying that it's not an area of opportunity from anybody's treasury, right? So, which is a negative signal in the market.
No, I think probably some of us said, Ritu, is that in the current way of measuring success of a CEO and the current way the shareholders look at it, the problem is investment in areas where it does not give immediate return may not be appreciated. That is why we said we have to look into is venture capital under the umbrella of large corporation with a CEO or somebody who has got the freedom to work on the venture capital. And his measurement of success is if he has put in 20, 100 venture capitals, has he at least broken even compared to all the 100 and is he made money? Out of 100, only 10 would have come through. Maybe 5 would have come through. But has he made overall? I think the same logic what we do when you put in mutual funds. We don't count every mutual fund should give me 8% return. It's not, some will be giving minus 14, some will be giving plus 25. So that is how we'll have to look at it. I think that's the mindset we require. And that for that mindset, you need an independent fellow running it. Is measurement of success has to be different from measurement of success of the brick and mortar company. That's what is probably we meant there.
So for example, in the previous panel, there was Abhishek from RP Goenka Group, SG Group, basically there, right? And his take was that they're a cash-rich company, and the opportunity of the number of brands that sit in India is much lower than California, if I was to take a look at it that way. And they obviously have expertise in consumer businesses. So they decided to take money from their treasury function and park it separately and use that to create the portfolio approach, because they'll also have failures. It doesn't matter, right? It's early stage. It's not a sectorial thing. It's somewhere, just the law of how failures work here, right, on portfolio levels.
See, I'll give you an example of this. I don't know how far you realize that in the older times when we were working in companies, we used to have a corporate department looking for long-term, which is very different from that today. Okay, and we ended up getting into so many different dysfunctional areas, like L&D trying to do export of shoe uppers. Okay, it's all very interesting when you look at it. And this is exactly what is going to happen to a venture capital. If you create a venture capital by itself, will you synergize or will you only ensure that you multiply the money what you have put in the venture capital? That question need to be answered.
So there were
Because
two people.
yes, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, finish your point. I was just going to say
one
something.
CEO may say that this is my long-term direction and said, I'm going to get into areas which have never been there. So I'm going to increase my value. The other CEO will come and say, what the heck are you trying to do? I want to be in core business. So it's going, that's why I'm telling you, so unless there's a very clear venture capital defined, accepted and norms established, and out of that, something can be of sync to you, something may not be of sync to you also.
In the previous panel, there were two interesting thoughts expressed on this. One said that their company doesn't look at financial returns at all. They do only strategic investments in startups. So if it makes the strategic sense, they will invest and they will never exit when it is something on which they should get a strategic advantage. Another one said that they will look for both strategic and financial, because without financial measurement and metrics, you may not achieve much efficiency if you look only at strategic. And he said that they don't even mind exiting some of them at the right price if it happens. So, and both are corporates, both are large corporates working at the global level. So I think there are.
Can I ask one question here just to understand? If I'm investing on a strategic objective, and if I don't have any control, that means he can give this to everybody else. How do I succeed?
No, you will have to have some, see, if you make an investment, then you will have to have some rights, right? You can have a board seat, you can have some rights in the agreement and things like that.
Unless you are large interest, it doesn't work, sir. That's something we have noticed.
I know. So
you need to have a large interest, no more a startup.
Correct. So then, so how do you balance between operating at a distance and how much closer you go? Because the closer you go, the more you will disturb the startup's own rhythm of working. But if you are at a distance, then what you say can happen, that the startup can grow in different direction than what you have envisaged, and then it can get into the hands of the competitor. Various things can happen. Intellectual property can be compromised, whatever. I think they're all challenges. One has to find the solutions to some of these challenges.
No, and to Ritu's point, I think it comes back, at least from our perspective, right? It comes back to two things. One is policy certainty, right? Maybe in consumer brands, you have much more policy certainty and freedom to operate than in agriculture, where you can take a portfolio approach even with your in-house treasury. Second is, again, coming back to capability. Am I better off giving that money to a venture fund to do what it wants to do with it than do it in-house, right? So I think it's a complex question. And one thing that we found is we've been much more successful at partnering with startups abroad. Not necessarily because they have better technology or anything. It's just that they want access to the Indian market. We're able to provide them that access, and it becomes a much more complementary relationship in a lot of ways than partnering with an Indian startup, right? Fortunately or unfortunately. So these are some of the realities that we've seen over the last few years.
So you should develop business outside India and then provide access to those markets from Indian startups. Yeah.
That's what seems to be the motive.
There are always two sides to a coin.
So. I think the treasury approach is an interesting idea. So I think that needs to be a little bit evaluated. I think that some of the challenges they've also mentioned is that if you're looking at purely as a treasury objective, then how do you measure the returns, and at what intervals do you measure the returns? I'll just give you a simple example, right? Our Omnivore investment, I don't know how many times it gets evaluated. We don't get into it because the CFO is running here and there saying that this time the valuation has gone up, should we take it, not take it? This time the valuation has gone down, should we write off, not write off, right? So in terms of, I think a framework to how do you manage that? So I think once that we know that this is the right way to evaluate, this is the right way to do it, then I clearly know, okay, 100 crores is parked there. And this is the potential plus or potential minus that can happen. And that, at least that range is available to us. The other way with the treasury, makes a bit of a arbitrage sense is that I think most agri companies get financing at a very, very low rate. Are ridiculously low rates, are much lower than lending rates, right? So I think that also creates a bit of an arbitrage that if you have a healthy balance sheet, your cost of capital is not too high. So even if you were to write off in about 5 years, 5 years interest should be not more than about 20, 25, 30%, right? So I think that's another way. So I think it's a very interesting idea in terms of how do you allocate capital. And this is the very core issue of how do you allocate capital and how much of it do you allocate. Probably I think we should explore a little bit more in that in terms of how do we make it palatable to our finance friends.
Perhaps we should have Abhishek to join this discussion as to how they go through that piece internally.
Okay, so I think we have spent some good time on this discussion. Thank you all very much. We have had some very interesting points of view which have come out. I have tried to capture them, and of course this is getting recorded, so we will try to capture all the points and then see if we can circulate them back to you. But I think many points have come out which are acting as constraints or which are acting as both headwinds and tailwinds. Both are there in this journey. But how do we define some kind of structures which can increase corporate engagement, whether it is a non-financial engagement or financial engagement, both? How can we create some structures and facilitate this from ThinkAg side? I think some very good suggestions came. We will also work on them and then try to create some kind of an action plan out of this. So on behalf of ThinkAg, I want to thank all of you for sparing your time and giving your valuable inputs into this discussion. And we look forward to staying in touch with you and take this forward to its logical conclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for having us.
Good for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.